Channel 5's Pam Dale, keeping you in touch.
There are laws to curb its use, campaigns to make it socially unacceptable, volumes of proof that it can kill you, and still tobacco thrives. But today a Supreme Court ruling that would seem to be hazardous to the cigarette industry, that a label is not a shield against lawsuits. Tonight, the power of an indestructible industry, why the tobacco companies are still breathing easily.
This is ABC News Nightline. Reporting from Washington, Ted Koppel.
Let's pretend for a moment. Let's pretend that a conspiracy by some foreign power were to cost us 390,000 American lives annually. Let's pretend that this same conspiracy was costing the United States more than $52 billion a year in health care and lost productivity. If those incredible costs in lives and health and money were actually being inflicted on this country by some foreign power, we would almost certainly go to war to prevent it. Well, you know where this is going, of course. We're not talking about a foreign conspiracy. We're talking about what we're doing to ourselves by smoking, principally cigarettes. It's not altogether inaccurate, in fact, to suggest that a conspiracy of sorts has been and continues to be at work. Suggesting it, though, is one thing. Proving it in a court of law that the tobacco industry has conspired to keep us smoking, whatever the cost to our national and individual health, that's another matter. One such case made it all the way to the Supreme Court, which today issued a ruling. On the face of it, as Nightline correspondent Jeff Greenfield reports, on the face of it, it looked like bad news for the tobacco industry. But appearances can be deceiving.
I'm accustomed to a reasonable quantity of tobacco and alcohol. I'm said to have a sense of humor. Is that enough?
Only inconsequential facts.
When Rose Chipolone began smoking in 1942, the habit was considered sophisticated, even glamorous.
Time right now for a lucky strike.
This is a man who smokes Marlboro cigarettes.
By the time she died of lung cancer in 1984, cigarette ads were banned from the airwaves, and smoking was well on its way to becoming a practice forbidden in most places where Americans work, eat, travel, and relax. Today, according to the Centers for Disease Control, barely a quarter of all Americans smoke, the lowest level since the agency began monitoring smoking habits in 1955. But there is one place where tobacco is still king, the courtroom. Tobacco companies have never had to pay damages for the illnesses allegedly caused by smoking. Today, 8 years after Rose Chipolone's death, the Supreme Court opened a small breach in the wall between tobacco and legal liability. Here's what the court did. Tobacco companies had argued that the warning labels on cigarette packs and in advertisements, required since the mid-1960s, shielded those companies from legal liability. State courts, they argued, were preempted from imposing any legal liability on the companies. Today, the Supreme Court said that was only partly true. Yes, the warning labels meant that companies did not have a duty to warn consumers about the dangers of smoking. But, the court said, consumers could try to show that the companies had provided express warranties that smoking was healthy, and could also try to show that the companies were guilty of fraud or concealment in hiding the dangers of smoking.
I think today's ruling exposes the tobacco industry to public accountability for the health and safety damage that it inflicts. It eliminates the rather powerful argument that they have had up to now that by simply complying with the federal labeling requirement, they had essentially a license to lie, to deceive, to misrepresent, and to conceal from the public the emerging body of data on the hazards of smoking. That license is gone.
Tobacco industry lawyers said the decision was, at most, a minor defeat.
The fact of the matter remains that this industry has withstood those same claims for 38 years, and juries have consistently rejected those claims.
Clearly, juries have shown enormous skepticism about holding tobacco companies responsible for the smoking habit. If millions of Americans have stopped smoking, many jurors say, doesn't that show that those who still smoke do so at their own risk?
I think everybody recognizes in this day and age that smoking is very dangerous. Nobody is defending the product. They are just defending the right of people not to get sued over something that was someone else's voluntary act.
But wait a minute, say anti-smoking lawyers. Look at the ads for cigarettes that fill the magazines. Look at the images of vitality and virility. That, says the lawyer who helped get cigarette ads off the air, may mean legal trouble for tobacco.
Show a man with a watch diving into a swimming pool, and you are representing that that watch is water resistant. If it is not, there can be liability. In the same way, when they deliberately craft ads showing people engaged in very vigorous, healthful outdoor activity, and we can show through their own records that they wanted to create the impression that cigarettes were healthy, that's the kind of information which can doom them under the express warranty theory.
They also claim that internal tobacco company documents may convince a jury that the companies engaged in deliberately concealing health risks.
They had been desperately trying to prevent the evidence about their ongoing fraud and, in fact, their conspiracy to pretend that they weren't yet convinced that smoking caused disease, that scientists weren't yet convinced that it was an open scientific question. They were doing everything they could to prevent that evidence from getting to juries.
But even if plaintiffs produce that kind of evidence, that may not be enough to win in court.
The plaintiffs have to do more than simply show intentional misrepresentation. They also have to show that that caused people to smoke. And the fact is that since 1964, people in this country have known the grave dangers of smoking. So for people to say that it was the intentional concealment that caused them to smoke, even though they already knew of the grave dangers, is going to be a pretty hard case to make.
Someday we may look back on today's decision as a turning point in the fortunes of the $31 billion a year tobacco industry. But consider this. Last year, with the most restrictive anti-smoking regulations in history in effect, tobacco profits showed a healthy or unhealthy increase. I'm Jeff Greenfield for Nightline in New York.
So is there any reason to believe that the tobacco industry is in trouble? Not so as you'd notice it on Wall Street or on Capitol Hill. That part of the story in a moment.
This is ABC News Nightline, brought to you by Allstate.
Elmer, I want a new car.
We're not new car kind of people.
A Toyota Corolla with all kinds of fancy options.
We're not fancy options kind of people.
But now we can save big on air conditioning, AM, FM stereo cassettes, power windows and door locks, the whole shebang.
Save up to $1,100 on the Toyota Corolla LE Extra Value Package.
Guess we're fancy options kind of people now.
Change is good.
I love what you do for me, Toyota!
Square for 148 North St. Andrews, Prowler, North St. 81%.
Of all the things around your house that need batteries, there's one thing that needs a good, fresh battery most of all. See your Allstate agent for a free home fire safety brochure. And please, check the battery in your smoke detector often.
Chocolate stuff? Nope. Any candy sprinkles? Uh-uh. Is there anything in there? Well, I can hear it.
There isn't a lot of sugar in Kix. That's what Moms like. But there is a crisp corn crunch that kids like.
Want to split it? Nah, you can have it. I'll get some more.
Kix, kid tested, mother approved.
I hope he gets more than one.
ABC News continues its report of shocking sexual attacks allegedly by the Navy's top guns. Sam Donaldson, the full story, primetime, Thursday.
Representative Mike Synar, an Oklahoma Democrat, is a member of the subcommittee on health and environment. His ongoing opposition to the tobacco industry includes an effort to ban all tobacco advertising. Representative Dick Durbin is an Illinois Democrat and co-chairman of the Congressional Task Force on Tobacco and Health. Mr. Durbin was behind the 1987 bill to ban smoking on airline flights under 2 hours in duration. Both congressmen join us in our Washington bureau. Diana Temple is an analyst in the stock research department of Salomom Brothers, where she is a specialist on the cosmetics and tobacco industries. Ms. Temple joins us from our New York studios. One would think, given all the health consciousness of the past few years, and particularly as we watch the legal noose tightening just a little bit around the neck of the tobacco industry, Ms. Temple, that tobacco stocks wouldn't be doing all that well, but in point of fact, they're doing reasonably well, aren't they?
Well, the tobacco stocks have been off some since the start of the year, but because the profits have been strong, the profits will probably be up over 20% this year. That strong profitability has bolstered the stocks over time.
Why are they doing so well when fewer and fewer people are smoking?
Well, because cigarettes are perceived as a dying industry, you don't have new competitors coming in. And also, cigarettes in the United States are relatively inexpensive at about $1.80 a pack relative to the price paid in some countries outside of the world.
But in point of fact, the tobacco companies are making more money today than they were a year ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago?
They're definitely making more. They are shipping more cigarettes overseas, very strong exports. The top two of the companies, Philip Morris and American Brands, now sell more cigarettes outside of the United States than they do here. And they've had a lot of manufacturing efficiencies, and they raise prices higher than inflation each year.
Congressman Synar, since they have money, I would assume that that makes itself felt up on the Hill. How?
Well, there's a lot of financial clout up here, and they do their very best to reward their friends and punish their enemies. It's not so much in the campaign areas of filling the coffers of campaigns. It's more by being available for the things that members of Congress are interested in, cultural, sporting events, scholarships, things of that nature. So we see that kind of financial clout on a regular basis here, and they don't pick favorites. It's both Republicans and Democrats because their real goal is to make friends.
What is the argument, Congressman Durbin, that the tobacco industry makes in terms of why it should not simply be, I'm going to be outrageous here, simply be shut down? Here's an industry which directly or indirectly costs close to 400,000 lives a year in this country. As I suggested at the top of this program, if any foreign government inflicted that on us, we'd go to war with them.
You put me in a tough spot defending the tobacco industry and their argument.
No, I don't want you to defend them. I just want you to explain.
Well, I'll tell you what they have to say. There are a lot of jobs at stake. There are a lot of tobacco farmers who have an income at stake here. They suggest that it's a matter of the right to smoke as if it is somehow protected by the Bill of Rights. And let's face it, when it comes to their power, they have people in the right places, on Capitol Hill, but in the executive department and in state legislatures across America. They've got people there to protect them from having laws like our bill to ban smoking on airplanes. That was bottled up for years before we had a chance to finally bring it for a vote.
Why do they have so many people helping them? Is it as crass and as simple as making tickets to sporting events available, making money available for campaigns, or is there something a little subtler here that I don't get?
Well, I can't find that subtle argument myself, but I can tell you they are pervasive. They're involved in everything. I get an invitation to come down to a reception to meet a young girl from my congressional district who's been chosen as the 4-H Girl of the Year, sponsored by a tobacco company. And I'm thinking to myself, doesn't it dawn on them what this tobacco company is doing to make its profits and pay for this trip? That's one tiny example. As Congressman Synar said, they're everywhere.
Now, Congressman Synar, let's not talk about everywhere. Let's talk most specifically about the subcommittee on which you serve, Subcommittee for Health and the Environment. I have been told that that committee heavily favors, in terms of the number of members on that committee, the tobacco industry. Is that true? And if so, how is that possible?
Well, it's possible because they've been very successful in clouding the issue. What they've done is merged an alliance with some groups that have a better image than them, the advertisers, the newspaper publishers, and the ACLU. And they've confused the issue away from health to First Amendment rights. And so members of Congress are able to basically vote with them without really saying that they agree with the policies of cigarette smoking. Secondly, very frankly, Ted, there's not a lot of grassroots movement out there in Oklahoma or Illinois, where Dick and I are from, that really are calling us in town meetings to really hold the tobacco companies accountable. That's really why they have a free run in Washington, because there's really no one pressing the other side very hard.
Well, you know, when you say there's no one pressing the other side very hard, I am constantly amazed, especially when I go to a state like California, which usually tends to be on the cutting edge of social issues. You can't find a hotel where, you don't have to decide beforehand whether you want to be in a smoking room or a non-smoking room. Not only are there non-smoking sections in restaurants, most of the restaurants are non-smoking. If you want to smoke, you got to go outside. The general move in this country keeps moving more and more in the direction of non-smoking. How come that hasn't translated itself into the kind of political clout that can give you and someone like Congressman Durbin what you need to make the points you try to make?
Well, they've been very successful in legitimizing themselves. They've gone out and bought food companies like RJR Nabisco and General Foods, and what they're doing is they're trying to make it tough to vote against the same company that makes Oreo cookies and Velveeta cheese. Secondly, they've changed with the dynamics of Congress. You know, it used to be there where you had influence with one or two of the senior members on agriculture or some of the other committees. You could bottle up some things. Well, they've expanded that base, and as Dick said, they're everywhere. They're with the Black Caucus, the Hispanic Caucus, the Democratic Party, the Republican Party. They want you to like them so it's uncomfortable to go after them. They're not really trying to accomplish an agenda. They're just trying to stop one from ever being mounted against them.
All right, we'll get into the economics of this a little bit more. We have to take a break. We'll continue our discussion in just a moment.
Shoe Corporation announced a major retail expansion in 25 U.S. cities.
When I see a company that looks like a good investment, I check it out myself.
We make it easier to follow your own lead.
At Charles Schwab, I can get quotes, financial news, and when I make a trade, commission savings.
Always there to give you just the help you need.
Help yourself at Schwab today.
You must travel back in time 1 billion years to witness its birth. You will search in vain for a more enduring or brilliant creation. You can comb the world and never find one the same. It is rare. It is precious. It is love. And its only promise is forever.
There's a thin line between life and death, for road construction workers and for you. Last year, 8 people died in road work zones, and 6 of them were in motor vehicles. Watch for the orange signs, and watch for the other traffic. A little bit of caution now will let them get their jobs done, and we'll all be around to enjoy it later.
How will President Bush win back his popularity? We'll ask him and Mrs. Bush the questions you want answered. A 2020 exclusive, Friday.
And we're back once again with Representative Synar and Durbin and Diana Temple. Ms. Temple, let me go back to what sounded like a little bit of a paradox in something you said before. You said the industry is doing well because it's perceived as being a dying industry. I understand what you were talking about. You were saying there's no competition. And that's one reason why it is doing well. But dying in any immediate sense?
No.
I mean, you don't really think the tobacco industry is going to go away over the next 10 years?
No, I don't. I think what's happening is that the units are declining in the United States about 2 or 3% a year, and the incidence of smoking is down from about 40% in the mid-60s to about 25.5% now. It's just that other companies are not interested in getting into the business, and that makes it a better business, paradoxically.
Give us a little bit of a sense of the dimensions of this business, though. What does the tobacco industry as a whole earn on tobacco annually?
Well, they sell about $48 billion worth of cigarettes, and they'll make something over $6 billion after tax for the major companies I follow this year.
And what about in terms of overseas sales?
The total industry is about 5.5 trillion units. The United States industry
A unit being what, a cigarette or a pack?
1 cigarette.
Right.
And in the United States, it's about 509 last year, declining slightly, but the revenues go up because of the price increases. So it's,
and what about the exports?
exports have surged, particularly to Eastern Europe. Last year, exports were up about 13% to 193 billion. I think that number was about 70 billion 5 years ago. And it's interesting also to look at the communist countries where there was no cigarette label or no regulation of the cigarette industry, and they have very high smoking rates, not the 25% in the United States, and the cigarettes are much less safe, very high tar content versus the mild cigarettes sold in the United States.
Congressman Durbin, would it be silly to raise the moral issue here and say how, at a time when we're trying to cut back in this country, can we keep cranking up the exports to other countries? I guess that's foolish, huh?
No, I think it's a valid moral issue. The United States has had a reputation throughout modern times of exporting health and nutrition to developing countries. We are now developing a reputation of exporting death through these tobacco products. And our executive branch of this federal government is deeply involved in this. Let me tell you one other aspect, the moral aspect, if you will.
I might interject something on that point. The cigarettes that the American companies sell abroad are decidedly safer than the higher tar content cigarettes that many people in countries like Eastern Europe and even previously France and Spain smoked.
So it'll take you a little longer to get the emphysema.
A little longer to get emphysema and lung cancer. Can I raise another point, too, when you're talking about moral issues? If you ask most women in America what the #1 cancer cause of death among American women would be, they would usually answer breast cancer. In fact, it's lung cancer. The reason they don't know this, one of the reasons, is that women's magazines across the United States, by and large, will not write articles about lung cancer because they're so dependent on advertising revenue. It'd be a mistake to conclude from this program that this tobacco giant just has its power on Capitol Hill and in the halls of government. It has its power in the media, in sporting events, in business, across the board. They are pervasive.
Congressman Synar, put this into political terms for me. When I say it, I mean the economic statistics we've been talking about. Any industry that is capable of generating billions of dollars worth of income with its exports is, of course, an essential industry to this country at a time when we have such a balance of payments deficit, right?
It is true, and obviously that's one of the arguments that they try to persuade members of Congress in order to continue the activities that they have. But there are moral implications. There's also health implications. Ted, the one thing that we've skipped over tonight is the fact that this industry spends $3 to $4 billion a year advertising and promoting this product to replace those 390,000 smokers who die. And you know who they target? The most vulnerable in our society, our children, and the success in that advertising and promotion is in the numbers. 60% of all smokers begin before the age of 14, 90% before the age of 21. And those are really the people who can't make the same kind of educated decisions that adults can make. And that's one of the reasons why this decision today is very important, because I think it may give us in Congress some courage to do the right thing, not only for health, but for children.
Well, of course, they deny that they're targeting the kids. And I mean, I read what one of the apologists for the tobacco industry says, that Snoopy, for example, is the mascot for Metropolitan Life, and adults, after all, buy life insurance. It's not the kids who buy it. So Joe Camel doesn't necessarily mean they're targeting kids. Did you know,
Ted, that more kids identify Joe Camel than they do Mickey Mouse in this country today? That tells you a lot about the success of their advertising.
What about
If the advertising is that successful, it's interesting that some 50 million people have quit smoking over since the mid-50s.
But don't forget, they have to replenish their ranks each year. They're going to lose about 400,000 people who die and another 150,000 who quit. And to merely stay in place, they have to recruit over 500,000 children. That's over 1,000 kids a day that have to take up the smoking habit just to stay in place. And that's where they're turning.
Let me point out, first of all, that Ms. Temple, we did not invite you just to be the one lone defender of the tobacco industry, and it's not in that capacity that you came on. We did invite the tobacco industry to send representatives or to have one or more of their lobbyists come here. They declined. In any event, I'd like to thank all of you for joining us this evening. Ms. Temple, Congressman Durbin, Congressman Synar, good of all of you to be with us. I'll be back with a clarification from our show last night and a program note in a moment.
Last time I stained my house with that other brand. This time, I'm using Thompson stain.
Only Thompson's House and Deck Stain contains Thompson's Water Seal. It waterproofs better than even the leading brand's premium stain.
Now that's beautiful protection.
Thompson's Stain.
In our universe, there is always the unknown, the unpredictable. All we can do is prepare for it.
AT&T is now installing Fast Start. It can detect a cable cut instantly, so 800 calls can get back in minutes instead of hours.
We can send flowers for any occasion, anywhere, but only if our 800 service is up and running. Our 800 service isn't just a phone line, it's a lifeline.
I miss you.
AT&T has the most reliable 800 service, period.
AT&T. Call us.
We Americans have some very particular ideas of what we want in our cars and trucks.
I feel like the car's like wrapped around.
One company gets input from customers at every stage of new product development to find out exactly what they're looking for. That may be why 5 of the top 10 selling vehicles in America are built by the same company, Ford Motor Company.
With your help, our quality gets better all the time.
Ford Motor Company. Quality is job one.
It's working.
It's working.
For 2 days only, every gallon of paint is on sale at Sears. All interior, all exterior. Save 10 to 33% on every brand. All from the paint store you can count on. Sears. But hurry, sale ends Saturday.
Every time the Grand Prix comes to town, you dream about being a race car driver. But just because you're not a race car driver doesn't mean you can't have fun while you're driving. That's why your Ford dealers are having their Grand Prix of savings with the best deals of the year, like the top Ford F-150 Super Cab, with Grand Prix savings of $2,000. And that's loaded with AM/FM stereo, air conditioning, 5-speed transmission, and more. But with these savings, they're really moving fast. So stop dreaming and have some fun. The starting line is at your Ford dealer.
It's enough to drive you mad. On the next Good Morning America, car theft. Is it out of control? Then the special prosecutor in the Iran-Contra investigation here on Good Morning America.
Last night I reported that former Assistant Secretary of State Elliott Abrams was one of those indicted by the special prosecutor in the Iran-Contra affair. In fact, Mr. Abrams was not indicted but pleaded guilty to 2 misdemeanor counts of withholding information from Congress. So I stand corrected, and my apologies to Mr. Abrams. Tomorrow night, on Nightline, one of our guests will be Butch Reynolds, the American runner who is fighting for an Olympic berth despite a suspension over alleged steroid use. That's our report for tonight. I'm Ted Koppel in Washington. For all of us here at ABC News, good night.
If you wish a videocassette version of Nightline, the cost is $14.98, plus $3.95 shipping and handling. If you wish a printed transcript, please send $4 to 1535 Grant Street, Denver, Colorado, 80203.
Nightline is a presentation of ABC News. More Americans get their news from ABC News than from any other source.
Anything can happen when the commission-a-thon continues. Thursday, Tony puts together the pieces of a 35-year-old mystery.
I saw the boy that killed my brother.
A priest is a murderer?
The commission-a-thon continues Thursday.
A slight chance for a shower overnight with a low in the 50s.